Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in to Losing You, Gaining Yourself. Hi, my name is Carla Newson, and my friends call me Cece. Today, we're going to speak with Dave Feldman, who has done extensive research on the body's relationship with food. In my opinion, he's definitely an expert in this field. I enjoyed so much this discussion where Dave speaks about his body's relationship with food, exercise, and becoming a ketogenic Nazi. Even if you decide to try this program or you never decide to, I guarantee you're going to learn more about diabetes, ketones, inflammation, and our metabolic rate than you ever imagined. So grab your favorite beverage and maybe a pen and notepad, and let's enjoy the conversation. Hello, David. Thank you so much for coming to our show, Losing You, Gaining Yourself.
Thank you so much for having me, Cece.
I'm just thrilled to talk to you because you have done a major lifestyle change, and that's basically what I like to talk to. I like to talk to people who have made that change from living that negative lifestyle that hasn't gotten them where they need to go, that hasn't gotten them to the success and the happiness and the health that they would like, and have transformed and continue to hold on to that transformation. So let's get right into it. This series is on the body, weight, exercise, and just basically that shift. And you've had an interesting relationship with food. Let's first start there in your youth, as a child, let's say 5 years old or whatnot, and what kind of food and eating you grew up with.
Sure. Well, in many respects, I would say I'm kind of the product of the age that I've been living in that I didn't realize it at the time, but as I was growing up in the 70s, it's right around the time that the food pyramid was coming out and the concept of the the low fat diet started taking wind. So I kind of entered into what I sort of now consider to be the real age of junk food. Before that period of time, unbeknownst to me as a kid, it wasn't very common for there to be, say, a soda that came along with your food. And of course, the quality of the food kept changing as well, and not necessarily a good way.
Right.
But I was often with my mom until about age 8, and then I went to have to live with my dad. And I didn't care for living with my dad, but from age 8 to 16, I'd regularly be around friends who I was jealous of the fact that they could eat junk food anytime they want because their parents would get it for them all the time.
Okay.
And I now have to thank my dad in retrospect that while he wasn't the best cook in the world, he didn't actually buy a lot of sodas to keep in the house and didn't take me out for junk food all the time. And that's actually something that I now credit to being an important part of some early, better developmental health. The dark side of this story is once I got to the age of 16, and particularly as I started making more of my own money, I then started just chowing down. I mean, once I left my dad, I just went nuts on junk food and lived like many teenagers and college years people that you probably know now, and I certainly do as well. And slowly but surely, I think I kind of developed some very unhealthy eating habits.
Okay. Now, we had talked previously, and you talked about that your father was a vegetarian?
Yes, and with all due respect to my dad, not being a good cook and being a vegetarian really kind of drove me into the arms of meat.
I love that.
I have since really kind of refined my opinion a bit in that I have a lot of respect for vegetarians who are doing it for moral reasons, but I now understand a lot more about the human body to the extent that I would say be a vegetarian, just understand that there are a number of things that you want to supplement. It's a little more work, I guess you could say, in many respects, to be a vegetarian and get the right amount of micronutrients that you need.
Right. That is so true. So you had a shift that happened in your life, um, where you decided that things needed to change. What was basically, your weight, that you kind of kept at? Because you weren't, what we'd consider obese, but you had
No, no.
a different approach, or reasons for having changed your lifestyle.
Yeah, I was as thin as a rail up until around age 26, and I was actually very self-conscious about it and wore lots of clothes to kind of hide it and so forth. And then I was very happy with the fact that I sort of filled out, a lot of people around 27, 28, they kind of have a second puberty of sorts as far as like kind of extra padding that comes along.
Mm-hmm.
And slowly the padding kept kind of being added. But even before I had started this current lifestyle change that happened about a couple years ago, nobody would really have called me fat.
Right.
They would have referred to me as, probably solid, typical for somebody who is in their late 30s, early 40s. Nothing really strikingly unhealthy appearing about me.
Well,
I think
that.
for a long time I thought, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, no, no. For a long time, you thought.
For a long time I thought, oh, maybe I could lose like 5 or 10 pounds. I'd probably look just a little bit better because I could tell that I was building up a little bit of a gut, but really, truly, a little bit of one. Like
Okay.
it was, I had about a size 36 waist, which just wasn't that outstanding. Um, there were always plenty of people that said I looked really good for my age, regardless.
Mm-hmm.
So the lifestyle change that I ended up coming into wasn't due to wanting to lose weight in particular, but it was something I was becoming a little more conscious of and thinking that it was just due to old age, or getting older rather,
Mm-hmm.
I should say.
Because you're not old at all.
No, I'm 43
Okay. Yeah.
for this June.
Yeah. So you're still a young man, but you saw you wanted to make some changes because you saw changes were happening into your body. What was the catalyst that made you, kind of like, because you which we'll go into a little bit later, but your diet and your eating style is so, you know, different than the average person or even the average,
Oh,
dieter. So let's talk about
definitely.
let's talk
Yeah.
about what
So
did that.
what happened was is in 2014,
Mm-hmm.
I was getting a routine physical, and I got back a test that usually is a good marker for pre-diabetes and diabetes. It's called a hemoglobin A1C test.
Okay.
And at that time, the score had come back at 6.1. Now, if you have a 5.7 to a 6.4, then you're considered pre-diabetic from that
Okay.
test. And if you have a 6.5 and above, then you're considered type 2 diabetic. And coming right up to that test, I was like, well, I've been kind of crushing some deadlines. There's been a lot of work I've been doing where my diet wasn't really good. I'm going to go ahead and take some steps to clean up my diet a little bit and then see what it looks like in 2015. Sure enough, 2015, almost exactly a year later, I was drinking a lot more water. I just got done running a big marathon. Test again, and I got the same exact score, 6.1. And I
Wow.
was I was thrown off by that. And a little bit of context, almost everybody on my dad's side of the family, including cousins that I have that are close to my age, are now type 2 diabetic. Unfortunately, my dad and all of his siblings, and unfortunately, a lot of the children, again, the cousins on my side. And it concerned me a bit. I was really adamant that I did not want to become diabetic, and that if there were steps I could take now, that I'd go ahead and do that. And that's when I got introduced to what's commonly referred to now as the low carb, high fat diet. It's what a lot of diabetics use
Okay.
to bring down their total glucose that's flowing through their blood and causing insulin spikes. And the long-term outcome of that is type 2 diabetes.
Okay. So how did that work for you, going on that low carb situation?
Well, that's where my story takes a pretty interesting turn. So I originally did this to bring down the total amount of glucose, bring down the total amount of insulin. What I found was after going on this diet, almost everything across the board improved. Things I just kind of associated with just being a part of getting older, energy levels increased for the first time and sustained increase for a while afterwards. Like I would say I had a burst of maybe about 40% more energy, which I want to say is now kind of tapered back down to 25 to 30% more energy. But still, I certainly have more energy than I did for the decade before this. I lost 35 pounds, even though I wasn't actually trying to lose any weight at all.
Mm-hmm.
I'm now at the weight that I was when I was leaving high school and going into college. And I'm pretty locked at that weight. Like my body will, even when I'm trying to gain weight, it won't actually go that much above that.
That's awesome.
And I have more mental clarity by far. And this is something that gets talked about a lot within the community, because if you bring your carbs down low enough, then you burn more fat. And part of burning more fat is you actually switch your metabolic pathway to burning more ketones for your brain. And so fatty acids get broken down into ketones, ketone bodies, and they then feed your brain instead of carbohydrates, getting broken down into glucose and glucose feeding your brain.
Okay. So
I can say I honestly can feel the difference.
that's awesome. So let's talk a little bit more about this ketones.
The ketones. So one kind of misconception is after people learn about the ketogenic diet, they believe all of your energy, all of your fatty acids get converted over to ketones. And I contend, after learning a lot more about the science and so forth, actually no, your body is running primarily on fatty acids from the food that you're eating, but also from the stored fat you have on your body.
Okay.
It's one really neat thing about it. You've probably know, and probably many of your listeners know, that even if you haven't heard of somebody who's on a ketogenic diet, you've known of people who fasted, and usually have a very common story of the fasting, which is it's kind of miserable for the first day to 3 days, and then you hit this real high where all of a sudden you have a lot of energy, you actually don't feel that hungry, and you feel great. You feel like you could just keep going.
Right.
That's literally the state of ketosis. That is, you're now burning your body fat, and your body fat, what it's storing are fatty acids. The same fatty acids I'm getting on a daily basis from food. And if you bring down the total amount of sugar you're getting from carbohydrates, you will bring your body to want to then break down and use either your stored fat or fat from your food. And it very easily switches back and forth between them. The one thing that a lot of people don't get is that through most of human history, humans would go in and out of a state of ketosis pretty regularly because you just couldn't count on food.
Mm-hmm.
Food was was commonly scarce.
Right.
And all of a sudden, you wouldn't know about getting the next meal, and you just have to deal with that. But on top of that, sugary, especially condensed sugary foods, etc., they were not plentiful and available. For most humans, it was a whole lot of fat and protein, particularly from meats and so forth. Sure, you could go for legumes and tubers and so forth, but the prized meal a lot of times was trying to hunt down and score game and meat and so forth. And that's what our body has a lot of practice with. From an ancestral perspective, our bodies have a lot of practice with dealing with a lot of protein and fat and some amount of carbohydrates. It's only truly, and like just the last 100 years, and in a more concentrated way, the last 30 or 40 years, that our bodies are dealing with something it never has had to deal with before, which is a plentiful, endless supply of high refined carbohydrates. And unfortunately, it has very negative effects. And that's part of why I feel like this diet that I'm on now isn't just about the good things that I'm doing for it. It's really about the removing of the bad things I was doing before.
Okay.
The standard American diet that I had before was what was making it. So to your larger question about, what ketosis means, a lot of people don't necessarily go so far as to bring down their carbohydrates to the point where they're in complete ketosis like I am.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people just get under 100 carbs a day, which is just low carb, high fat, but they'll still have, like bread at some degree. They'll still have some rice to some degree. All of these things I don't have at all anymore in my life.
Okay.
But you can, in fact, be low carb, just be like under 100 carbs a day, and you still can see enormous health benefits because, again, you're removing all of that sugar that the body's not used to actually having in the first place.
Right. So what about exercising your life? Did exercise play a big part in your life change?
Surprisingly, I would say not as much as I used to think it meant. Let me kind of expand on that a little bit.
Okay.
I think that really your health was determined probably about 60% by exercise and 40% by diet. And I'm totally turned around. I really think it's probably about 80, maybe even 90% diet. I really do. The macronutrients you get and the micronutrients you get, and from a molecular level, I've really been getting into biochemistry a lot. And from a molecular level, the "you are what you eat" really does apply.
Yeah.
Your body truly, if you do not burn it and you do not excrete it, it's in you right now.
Yeah.
And the human body does a fabulous job. I mean, an amazing job at sorting through what you're eating to work out as best as it can to make use of what it's been given. But for example, one of the things that I found fascinating was learning more about the liver. The liver is sort of the straight-laced control freak partner in your body who just puts up with all of the crap you give it.
Right.
And so when you drink, it's going, I have to detoxify all this. And when you give it like a whole bunch of fructose, like high fructose corn syrup, it's the one that has to actually sort out from a molecular level to get out the glucose from it so that it can then carry it on. And then it's really impressive how much we stress our livers with the standard American diet right now, as well as just the GI tract in general. Is these kinds of things are things you can really tell are making a difference with your body. Well, then on top of that, it's trying to sort all of those out. It's absolutely trying its hardest to gather all the energy it can and pull it into your system because it never wants to waste any energy. It doesn't know on your behalf when you're going to suddenly be in a starvation mode because it doesn't assume the grocery store is right around the corner. So it's always trying to capture the energy and it's always trying to spit out all the toxins. But the more that you give it an avalanche of toxicity and the more you give it trans fats and all kinds of things, the more they can eventually leak their way inside the system, and then the system gets overloaded with trying to get it back out. But that's why we have what's known as diseases of civilization, diseases that you don't find in, indigenous tribes that are still living today.
Right. That
until they get introduced to Western food, do they see things like diabetes and heart disease and obesity.
Right.
Even the elders who get hardly any exercise at all don't seem to be packing on a lot of weight. And a lot of it's because they're more metabolically aligned with an ancestral diet as opposed to what we came up with recently.
Right. You made an interesting comment, and I I hope I quote you right on this. You had said that the food we eat today determines the diseases we have tomorrow.
Yes, for sure. And I like to play the game of poker a lot. And one of the reasons I like the game of poker is, for one, it's really good at teaching risk modeling. But for two, I keep being reminded over and over again, not just with other people, but with myself, how much the human brain really wants to think of things in very, very short time spans. Just wants to. You don't know about this food somebody's introducing you to, and you're afraid it might make you sick. And you eat it, but you seem to be okay a couple hours later. And no, that seems to be fine. And then you're like sick 2 days later. It does not even occur to you that it's even possible that it was that food you were introduced to.
That's true.
There's no way. You would have expected that it would have affected your system sooner. And the reason I bring up that example is I found out even before I had gone on this diet that I have something called fructose malabsorption, most likely due to the amount of high fructose corn syrup I was getting from drinking enormous amounts of soda in my late teens and 20s. And fructose malabsorption manifests itself in GI stress, and typically the doctor will just call it IBS. The problem is that it doesn't manifest itself right away. It usually can take 12 to 24 hours before it happens. And because of that, it was very difficult for me to isolate down, because I would constantly think it was the meal I had just eaten or something I had just drank. Too much time had passed before I could actually see what it was. But given that I had been trying to figure that out for 10 years, at least, I think about how long I had it, and that I was noticing that I was trying to experiment to find it, that it just didn't even occur to me. I thought, look, if either this is, some kind of ongoing behavior with exercise, or something that I'm eating ongoing and it's just manifesting very sporadically, or it's something I just ate, in which case I have some allergy that I just need to figure out what it is. And I just was stumped the entire time. And had I just kept a diet diary and accounted for the possibility, and again, 12 hours to 24 hours isn't even that long of a span of time.
No, not at all.
So you take that in mind. You take just this behavior, which I feel like I'm indicative of a lot of people's behavior. They'll eat a lot of junk food over the course of a week. And one of the only low-hanging fruit metrics that they can catch is their weight. Oh, my weight changed. I gained weight. That ends up being something that can maybe raise an alarm. But if it doesn't increase your weight, oftentimes you can even start adapting to feelings of unhealth, if you will, that you otherwise wouldn't have put up with before, but you've now become accustomed to. And especially when your peers, your friends, are complaining a lot of the same symptoms. They need their coffee to wake up, for example, right? And you never stop to go, why can't I just wake up without my coffee? Why do I feel so lethargic? Why is it that all of us after our lunch want to take a nap, and then that ends up being something we build some camaraderie over? I really could just go home and take a nap.
Food coma.
Right, exactly. And it becomes almost celebratory, right?
Right.
But that really is part of the culture that I've found myself on the other side of now. I never thought I would be. I used to myself, I feel kind of bad about it now. I used to, along with other friends, talk badly about people who we considered health nuts. And you'd think of it like, I don't want to go to lunch with this person because they're such a Nazi about what they eat, right? And now I'm the Nazi about what I eat.
And I want to be the Nazi about what I eat.
Yeah, and it's actually very difficult. It's actually very it's strange because people are very supportive, or at least will state that they're very supportive about a diet where you're trying to be calorie restrictive. You're trying to just bring down the total amount of food that you're eating, and then when you have a diet where you actually are avoiding things that they are specifically eating, and you're saying, I'm just done with that. I won't eat another donut. I won't have another pastry. There's a weird kind of social stigma that comes with it, to the point where people who ask me about this diet, I say, actually, as radical as the changes are in the food that I've been eating by just bringing down carbohydrates so much, that's not the hardest part. The hardest part is the social stigma. It's surprising how many people, not even strangers, but even people who are in my life who love me and mean the best and don't really mean to make me uncomfortable, but they themselves can be uncomfortable by the fact that I'm making dietary choices that have been working out really well for me. And I'm now the health nut. I'm now the person who seems to be extremely concerned, and then I get to hear a lot of things like, well, you only live once, and I'm otherwise pretty good. I just like to have this once in a while, etc. It kind of sucks because a lot of times I feel like people put me in the position of being the food police when I don't want to be.
Right.
I always say, look, everybody's on their own health journey. You eat whatever you want to eat. I'm just telling you what I need to eat for myself, that this is what I need to do.
Right. So, what about, you mentioned a little bit about your family. Does your wife use the same program that you're doing of eating, and, how does it affect her or your, I know you said your father, he's being a vegetarian and so forth. How did your relationship with food affect them?
Well, so it's been a little bit of a mixed bag. My wife's not on the diet. She's, I think she kind of gets a little influenced at times, in that she'll occasionally joke, well, you'd be proud of me. I had, a burger without a bun or something along those lines.
Right.
But it was actually one of the very first conversations we had on our very first date, was that she appreciates being able to eat whatever she wants because she exercises like crazy. And I always maintain that, I think, as I would hope she would ask of me, all I care about is that she remains healthy. So as long as we're, both remaining healthy, that's kind of the deal.
Yeah.
My dad and my sister, after I'd gone on the diet, actually got very inspired doing it and started using me as a mentor. And I was able to help them out with two things that, my dad unfortunately was, diagnosed type 2 diabetic, I want to say like 5 or 6 years ago, and is now functionally cured. He was at an 8.1 A1C, which is not only very well into type 2 diabetes, but he was getting close to the needles where he'd have to start taking injections as well.
Wow.
But he's now down to, I want to say like 5.9. He's like at the edge of pre-diabetic. He also had hypertension, and that's disappeared. He now no longer needs to take any blood pressure medicine. And same thing with my sister. My sister wasn't pre-diabetic, but she was coming up close to the line there. And I was worried about a lot more with hypertension, and she now just recently had a score better than any score that I've had.
Wow.
But she was in the stroke zone for a while, and she was really getting concerned about it until she went on this diet. And it's because so much of this comes back to just inflammation. Let me actually explain real quick what inflammation is. Okay. Inflammation is a natural response by your body to an injury or an illness, in that it inflames. If you've ever twisted your ankle, for example, and it swells up, that's actually a normal reaction. Your body's trying to heal that area, and there's a number of different chemical reactions that take place in that. For example, the blood vessels expand because literally the cells of the blood vessels are actually separating from each other to pool blood there so that it can get a reparative process going. Well, imagine that that's happening all over your body all the time, that your body is in a constant state of crisis and repair. It's trying its hardest to clamp down this ongoing global emergency that's happening throughout your body.
Mm-hmm.
That's chronic inflammation. And it comes with it all of the signals that tell us it's a disease of civilization. But getting back to the time scale thing, we get to where we can adapt to it, because that's what humans do. Is if you did permanently hurt yourself in some fashion early on in life, your brain is not wired in such a way that it's going to always overly reflect on it. It even starts, and they have studies on this, it even starts building different neural pathways to kind of cope with it while still trying to keep a check on it at the same time. Anyway, obviously I get a bit into the weeds on this geeky biochemistry stuff, but it's actually really fascinating how much the body both adapts and can't adapt.
Right.
If you don't treat it right. There's a degree with which it'll give you some leeway.
Right. And that's
go ahead.
I was going to say, and that's when we start getting sick, when it's gotten to that point where it can't, and then we decide whether or not, okay, am I going to deal with this muscle pains and soreness or not, or do something about it.
And unfortunately it's really troublesome, because it's built in such a way that it can give you these short-term boosts to deal with emerging situations. And its ability to repair is just phenomenal, provided you actually rest and take care of the source of the injury.
Right.
But when the source of the injury is what you're actually ingesting, you can't do anything about that. It's up to your body to do something about it. And unfortunately, it'll eventually start losing its capability to deal with it. One of the most difficult things I had to learn, and the reason I now really believe in keeping insulin low, is the organ in your body called the pancreas that dispatches the insulin.
Mm-hmm.
It'll pick up the slack for you building more and more insulin resistance throughout your life. So if you eat a lot of junk food, you can be eventually building more and more insulin resistance, and your numbers on your blood tests will keep looking normal unless they take insulin, in which they'll keep seeing that your fasting insulin will keep climbing and climbing and climbing. And what's happening is your pancreas is getting more and more tired and getting overworked, and it has cells in it called beta cells that are like foundational cells. They'll start dying. Mm-hmm. And as they die, they don't come back. They're not a cell that can be repaired.
Okay.
And so unfortunately, it's a ratchet effect. You get up there far enough that once you start seeing problems with the diseases, you can't dial that one back enough to be able to deal with it unless you really bring down the amount of insulin by a lot. To give you a quick example, my dad and I have a different insulin response to the same foods. Mm-hmm. This is an example of one person being further down that road than another. So I have some amount of insulin resistance. That's what gave me the prediabetes. And I have repaired it to some degree by bringing down my total carbs. My dad has also repaired his. That's why I say functionally cured. He's not really cured, because if I have a slice of bread and he has a slice of bread, I'm not going to have as much of an insulin response, still much more than a normal person. Mm-hmm. He's going to have a huge insulin response because he can't help it. More of his beta cells are dead. And unfortunately, his pancreas has to work so much harder to get more and more of that insulin in there.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
Yeah, it's. I really do feel like so many of these other metabolic, not the diet too much, but there's so many more interesting things that are coming out about having unusually high insulin chronically and the amount of metabolic diseases that come from it.
Right. That's fascinating. Because I love the way you explain and break this down. You may think you're geeking out, but you speak in a way that, in layman's terms, and helps to, I know I'm able to understand what you're saying, And I do appreciate that, and I hope my viewers do as well, and I'm sure they do, because not all the time when we're eating food, it's about losing weight. It's really about how we feel, the things that we're eating, and its effect on our body. And weight
Absolutely.
weight is just one small component of that.
It's one that's overly focused on. So I would say, I want to say two things. Especially if you're a female and listening, because I honestly feel like females pay too much attention to weight relative to men. If you're a female and you're listening and you're taking steps to improve your diet, you should really just set aside the scale and not look at it hardly at all. What you should pay attention to is your waist.
Mm-hmm.
Your waist is what contains ultimately your adipose tissue, and there's a term called visceral fat. What they mean by that is it's the dangerous fat, the fat that builds around the belly. It's actually kind of interweaving through your organs as well, and it's a kind of fat that actually also has an ancestral past to it, in that it's meant to be more temporary, but it can eventually be a lot more. It can have more of a tight foothold on it. And one of my favorite doctors in this field, Ted Naiman, brought up a chart. He says there's actually no stronger correlation to all-cause mortality than than height to waist ratio. That your waist should be half of your height. Like you should aim towards getting it to half of your height as much as possible. And that's still today like one of the strongest things. Showed the graph, and it's like just this almost perfect line, going from one side of the axis to the other.
Right.
And it's because ultimately that shows how metabolically your body is making use of your body fat as appropriately as possible, so that you're storing not more than you really need. But then there's a second thing I want to say, again, specifically to women, is at the same time, don't be discouraged, because a very common phenomenon is women have a tougher time losing weight than men do. This is another reason why weight sucks. But women have a tougher time losing fat than men do, because, and I'm going to sound like a biological feminist here, they're more important. From a biological standpoint, I'm an engineer, I'm a software engineer. If I were engineering two entities that had to get together and mate to develop the offspring, and I was going to assign one of them to have the role of being that factory that actually built the human, then I would have the other entity run interference. The first entity, I would be very adamant, would be very good at retaining and conserving energy as much as possible. The other one would probably be much more bursty in energy, because they would have to deal with threats. Sorry, all the intelligence and all the conservation, especially with energy and risk mitigation, is on the female side of the fence.
Because women are created to be the unit that holds the extra life. So they,
Yes.
yeah,
you guys have so much more hormonally that you have to counterbalance, along with being actually alive, along with all of the other aspects of it. Like there's no question that the more that I've learned about endocrinology, the more that I've had enormous respect for the female human body, because there's just more weight and importance biologically placed on you, unfortunately.
Right. Makes perfect sense. So this has been, just a wonderful exercise and gaining knowledge about our body. The last thing I wanted to cover with you was concerning the changes. You've talked about a lot of different changes as far as your numbers, and what things have you noticed physically that have changed with the measures that you've taken to change your lifestyle?
I would have to say that perhaps one of my favorite things ever is that when you're eating fat primarily as opposed to carbs, by the nature of how it's used, your energy from fat, it just keeps everything very steady. So carbs are very bursty. You have a big high, you get a big rush, and then you have kind of a coming down period. And there's some science behind that. But the fat in particular, when I've learned more and more about fat and how it's trafficked through the human body, which relates back to kind of my cholesterol research, it is very, very steady and slow going. And the body means for it to be that way. It's kind of actually a mobilized source of energy, much more so than I think even lipidologists realize. Because of that, I found that there are things that I could do that I just couldn't have fathomed before. Let me give you a great example that just came up. My wife and I were scheduled through all of last year to do this Dopey challenge. Dopey is, of course, one of the 7 dwarfs, and it's the name of doing a series of races in a Run Disney marathon weekend, which we had just gotten back from, I want to say a couple weeks ago. Basically, they hold a 5K on Thursday, a 10K on Friday, a half marathon on Saturday, and then a full marathon on Sunday, all 4 days in a row. And you can sign up for any of those races, but the Dopey challenges, you sign up for all of them and you run all 4. I don't know what possessed me to decide that I was going to go ahead and do this, but my wife and I signed up for it. I ended up deferring it because I was too busy from the year before. And now it was coming up and we couldn't defer it again. And I had so many things that were going on coming up to this Dopey challenge that I was pretty sure I was just going to be completely wrecked. And I thought, well, at least I'm fat adapted. Maybe that'll count for something. And my longest practice run before doing the Dopey challenge was 6.5 miles, which is just undertrained, like woefully undertrained. I really should have been doing practice runs of like 20 miles or 22 miles or something, coming right up to that point. Well, so sure enough, I get through the 5K, the 10K pretty well. And on the day of the half marathon, they ended up canceling it because of thunder, which I'll concede I didn't mind too much. I would have liked if they canceled the marathon, but whatever. So day of the marathon comes. I tell my wife, I'm like, look, I'm just going to try to stay ahead of the van, which is parlance for the vehicle that's at the very end that sweeps everybody who's left behind, right? So it's I forget how many minutes behind the last person crosses the line, but the last person crosses the line, it's like, I don't know, 15 minutes behind, 20 minutes behind or something like that. Well, I'm thinking I'll probably, if I'm lucky, run a third of the marathon, maybe 8 miles, If I can, I'm going to try to keep just doing that steadily, and then I'll probably end up walking the rest because I'll probably just be beat. I ended up running 19 miles.
Oh, wow.
With hardly stopping at all. And I felt great. It just didn't bother me at all. I was stunned as it was happening. I was like, wow, I just can't even believe I'm still doing this.
That's awesome.
And unfortunately, I had never done this before, but I developed a blister on my left toe. And there was a few other things that I actually detail in my blog that kind of went wrong after that point that were almost comical. But it really brought to mind just how different I am relative to what I was. I'm technically, even for as little exercise as I'm getting relative to what I would expect for running a marathon, I'm technically more athletic and energetic than any time in my life. I can think of the time where I was the most trained up in my early 20s, and I couldn't have run a marathon. I would have probably hit the wall somewhere around mile 17 or 18, even if I had been training, because that's when most people's glycogen stores from their muscles get depleted. You probably heard of hitting the wall before.
Correct. Yes.
If you're fat adapted, you just don't hit. There's no wall because you don't have any glycogen in your body. You're burning fat. You're burning fatty acids and ketones for your energy. That's part of what was kind of neat. Is on my blog I detail how I was taking blood readings every 5 kilometers just to turn it into an experiment as well, and my ketones just went through the roof. They just expanded like crazy, and it's where I was clearly getting a lot of my energy.
Were you able to complete the marathon?
Yes, I was. Even though a lot of stuff went wrong, I was able to basically hoof the rest of it, and then I was back on track with my research and capturing more numbers.
That's beautiful.
But it's you want to know something else that was also amazing was the recovery. So much better. I don't know if you're familiar with lactic acid, but if you have an intense workout, you've got kind of that built up stiffness. A lot of that is lactic acid, which is a part of just normal cellular respiration, normal for glucose. Okay. Because it's actually part of the product that comes out of the metabolizing of the glucose, and usually you want to like walk it off. You don't want to like stand still or like go to sleep or anything like that, because you'll just really make it worse. It's another one of the benefits of being fat adapted is you build up almost no lactic acid. Wow. So I was not that stiff, relative to everybody else I knew who'd done the marathon, and including myself of a couple years ago when I had done a marathon 2 years ago. Okay. It's so weird. I was so much better trained for that one, and had a worse performance than this time around. I was way undertrained, had a better performance, a better recovery. It was just better all around. It's really crazy how much diet has so much of an impact.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, it has been just thrilling talking with you again, David. I am so thankful that you were able to come on my show and educate us really about our bodies and what we're putting in and how to really get the best out of, the best method, a really good method to getting the best out of our body. And your program, your lifestyle change may seem drastic to some people, but man, when you look at the benefits, it's like, ooh, sign me up. This is pretty awesome.
Well, if I could add one more thing, I've never enjoyed food more than I do now. Like a lot of people think what you normally associate with diet, that you're losing the things you love. And it's true, there's some things that I would thought that I would miss, but I now love, absolutely. I just had a grass-fed steak with my wife tonight, and I'd swear steak tastes better. Yeah. Hamburger patties taste better. I feel like I've kind of unlocked a better relationship between my actual cravings and, my palate, and I had never experienced that before. So I mainly just wanted to mention that to anybody who's considering getting on a low-carb, high-fat diet, that at a distance, it seemed scary to me at first and seemed like something I just wouldn't want to do. But it's, per my sister and my dad, they had the same reservations. We've all found that there's a lot of things to love on it. So I just wanted to fit that one in real quick.
Well, I'm glad you did. That's definitely a plus. Thank you for listening to Losing You, Gaining Yourself. You can expect an inspirational session every Monday right here on YouTube. To stay up to date with what's happening, follow me on Facebook at Losing You, Gaining Yourself, Instagram at Carlin_Newson. Get real-time updates on Twitter by following me there at Losing You, capital U, and Win. For more information, inspiration, visit and subscribe to my website at LosingYouGainingYourself at WordPress.com.